The UK has introduced a permanent ban on puberty blockers for those under 18. Now, of course, if puberty blockers are banned for those who are under the age of 18, they might as well be banned because the intention of puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones is to pause puberty, according to trans activists. But it has devastating side effects because you cannot pause puberty and have been proven to be incredibly dangerous for children. Now, what is so significant about this story? It's the first country that's putting a straight up blanket ban on puberty blockers for minors, full stop. Really important. This subject is being debated in almost every Western country. So the Cass Review, which I've mentioned before on the show, the Cass Review was a study of the use of puberty blockers and other transgender treatments that was initiated by the National Health Service, the NHS, and led by Dr. Hilary Cass. And it found that there was no evidence puberty blockers worked. There was no evidence that cross-sex hormones worked. And that, in fact, many of the treatments, so-called, that trans activists were advising had genuinely negative effects, which some people like Abigail Schreier and others have been screaming bloody murder about already for years. But this was the health service of a major Western country, in many ways the mother democracy for other Anglosphere countries, saying, no, these things are bad, we're putting a stop to it. Those arguments laid out in the Cass Review have already been cited in a recent U.S. Supreme Court discussion about whether or not individual state-level bans on puberty blockers or sex change surgeries for minors could be upheld. So we're already seeing that study being used by Supreme Court justices to argue that these treatments can also be banned in the U.S. And then, of course, currently in Alberta, right now, 3 laws restricting various transgender aspects of transgender ideology, have passed the legislature. LGBT activists are already suing the Alberta government and are actually asking the court to fast track their case in order to put a halt to the legislation, because Premier Danielle Smith, as promised, has also brought forward a ban on puberty blockers and sex change surgeries for minors. So here's how the BBC described this very groundbreaking news. The title of the article is Puberty Blockers for Under 18s Banned Indefinitely. And here, this is from the British Broadcasting Service. The ban on giving puberty blockers to under 18s questioning their gender identity is to be made permanent, Health Secretary Wes Streeting has announced. Streeting told MPs that he was making the temporary ban introduced in May indefinite across the UK, following a consultation and advice from the Commission on Human Medicines, calling the way the drugs has been used a scandal. Some of us have been saying this for years. The expert group said prescribing the drugs to children for gender dysphoria was a, quote, unacceptable safety risk. Now, LGBT activists in Canada are currently claiming that it's an unacceptable safety risk to ban puberty blockers. Here you have the UK Health Secretary stating the exact opposite. And it's important to note here that Wes Streeting is the health minister for a Labour government. The Labour Party of the UK is a very left-wing party. They are very pro-LGBT in almost every way, and they're pretty much as left-wing as Trudeau's government, although Trudeau's government is more like a comms department that occasionally governs, so that might be an unfair comparison to the Labour Party. Campaigners on both sides have reacted to the news, with those in support of the ban commending Streeting's integrity and those against it calling it discrimination. The usual garbage. Puberty blockers are drugs used to delay or prevent puberty happening. A temporary ban was put in place by the last Conservative government and has now been renewed twice by Streeting, who I re-emphasize is from the Labour Party. He said on Monday that the review identified cases where children had been prescribed the treatment after filling out an online form and only having one online consultation with a healthcare provider. The health secretary said it was essential for the government to be evidence-led when it came to healthcare. What a refreshing concept. And the reason that, again, the story is so significant is, again, UK is kind of the mother democracy, right? In Canada, we share the same monarch as the UK. And the UK was also ahead of the curve on the transgender issue. They went the craziest, the fastest. And so to see them turn this corner is an indication of where we're going to end up. And so this is both encouraging for those of us who have been pushing back against this for years to keep it up. It's actually making a difference. Secondarily, though, it's a warning to all those who, in the face of all of this evidence coming out, evidence coming from places like the Cass Review, that they like to talk about the wrong side of history, they are going to have the greatest medical scandal since eugenics hung around their neck when this thing is over. And every child who suffers side effects, who has a shortened lifespan, who has weakened bones, who has chest scars where breasts should be, who has a mutilated private area where healthy genitals should be, these kids and their pain should be laid at the feet of the activists right now who are campaigning against the Alberta government, who are campaigning against those politicians seeking to protect them. There is no excuse for this ignorance. It is only radicalism, and that is it. But we are, I think, starting to see a corner get turned here because there is too much evidence for people to deny. This has now been affirmed twice by a Labour government. It's been affirmed by the High Court. You've had top psychiatric experts in the UK come out and actually say the trans movement is irresponsible with how they talk about this issue because the way they talk about suicidal ideation is actually likely to cause suicidal ideation. So this is really big news and really positive news for Premier Danielle Smith in Alberta and for other premiers who are hopefully going to be as courageous as Danielle Smith was and follow her lead. Thank you all for watching this clip of the Bridgehead briefing. If you have any comments or discussions that you'd like to have, please drop those in the comments. If you found the video helpful, you can click like or you can subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. You can get our content wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you so much once again for your time. We hope you'll join us again next week.